when I was 17 years old, I started investing. So I've been consistently investing.
17 to 26 and now net worth of $500,000.
I would say, number one, I didn't get lucky buying Bitcoin back in 2014. I didn't receive the money from like my dad or anything like that. There's no inheritance there.
How do you break out of that comfort zone to like push yourself to actually do these things?
I'd get bored if I just like went to my job and came home and did nothing. I'm not saying that's wrong or right, but for my own personality, like I didn't want to do that forever. Andy and I used to own a business together, so him and I, we talk like every day.
If I had $500,000, I'd have this giant closet with everything. It's like, no, you wouldn't, because as you buy all those things, you don't have that money to invest. So you'd never accumulate it in the first place.
And I also knew that you have to test things out. You know, it's not like you just try nothing or you try one thing and it fails and you lose. It's like, no, you got to keep stepping up to the plate.
Like your main portfolio, break that down for me. Like what does your main portfolio look like? Hello and welcome to the Andy and Friends podcast. I'm your friend Andy, and on this episode of the podcast, I talk to my friend Kolin, otherwise known as the Decade Investor. I love Kolin's story because he's gone from a net worth of zero to now a net worth of over $500,000, and he's only 26 years old. If you are someone who is just starting out, or if you want to up your investing and wealth game, then this episode has a ton of great insights. Let's jump into it. And here we are on the podcast with my friend Kolin, otherwise known as the Decade Investor. How you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you, Andy. Glad to continue to be the number one most guest on this podcast. That's my goal. Andy reached out to me. We've been trying to plan this podcast for a very long time, ever since like Bitcoin was at 70,000. Now it's at like 50 something or 60, just about 60.
Can we go back to that?
I know, right? Which we're going to get into that today, not to take over the show, but it is something we're going to talk about. But no, glad to be here. Excited to talk about Bitcoin, some my investments and also one of my high risk portfolios as well.
Yeah, I love it. We have been doing trying to make this happen for a little while. But I think you're still like 2 or 3 podcast appearances higher than the next highest on the podcast. So you still reign supreme on the Andy and Friends podcast. So
good to know.
I'll send you a trophy. I'll put it in the mail tomorrow.
Thank you.
Make sure you get that. Okay. So one of the things we talked a lot on the podcast, you're a young guy who has done really well with your investments and stuff, which, we can explore a little bit of that. But we've kind of, every time I've done one of these with you, I've also kind of checked in on the net worth. So where is the Decade Investor net worth today?
Yeah, I'm 26 years old. That's not my net worth, but I'm saying that because there's not much longer I can say I'm the young guy anymore. So, but currently, I don't know the number, but around 500,000. Some days a little bit higher, some days a little bit lower, but around the $500,000 mark, which I think is like, I feel like my times on this podcast has been like 200,000. I think was the first time, then 300, then 400, now 500,000. So yeah, right around that $500,000 mark. And we'll talk a little bit later why at one point it was like almost 600,000. But yeah, around 500,000 currently.
Yeah, I think, it might even, your first time we talked on the podcast, might even been less than 200K. But either way, like, and remind me again, like what age would you say is the age you started investing?
I started investing at 17 years old. And like I said, I'm 26 and a half. So almost halfway to 27.
Yeah, so from 17 to 26 and now net worth of $500,000. So have you run the calculate? Like let's say you continue at your current pace, you don't start making a ton more money, you don't like increase, you just continue at your current pace, and you keep doing the things you're already doing. When does Kolin become a millionaire?
I don't know, actually. I haven't ran the numbers. Based on just like assumptions of market return and the time it takes for money to double, probably if I just did nothing, like I didn't add any more money and the market just returned the average, I think it's around like 7 years from now. It was how long it take for my money to double, which 500,000 to $1 million. But obviously I'm investing every week. And so it's probably gonna be faster than 7 years. I would love to get there by 30. So that's 4 years, 3.5 years.
Yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion you will do that, but also not just are you investing every week, but you will talk more about this in a little bit, but you're investing in certain things that could move the needle a little bit quicker than just the straight up traditional only approach. So, whenever I see you post things about like a portfolio or your net worth or whatever on Twitter or X, which by the way, which which do you say? Do you say Twitter? Do you say X? Have you gotten into the habit yet?
No, I feel like I'm the OG, so I still say Twitter. And I feel like it's kind of cool, it's like, oh, hey, I sent you something on Twitter. Check out my Twitter. Just makes me sound like I'm an old man.
X also it doesn't roll X spaces. I
Yeah.
posted on X. I don't know.
Doesn't sound as good.
So anyway, whenever I've seen you post those things on Twitter, inevitably, like, someone like asks how old you are and you tell them. And like the number one question I've observed, and maybe you've observed something differently, but number one question I've observed is like, how have you been able to invest this much at your age, at such a young age? Because typically people don't hit these numbers until much later in life. I know I certainly didn't. So how do you answer that? Like, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, I would say number one, I didn't get lucky, buying Bitcoin back in 2014 or whatever. Like that was not my my luck per se. I also would say I didn't receive the money from like my dad or anything like that. There's no inheritance there. And so really, like, the simple answer to your question is when I was 17 years old, I started investing. So I've been consistently investing since then. So that helps, even if it's, some months it was $50, some months it was $100, $200, and another month it was like $4,000 a month or more. So, so that was it, consistency. But then also it was finding ways to increase my income. And I know that sounds, a lot easier said than done. It's like, oh, just go make more money. But honestly, it was finding ways that, whether that was, which is what I did, like start a business that did well. And not only did I then increase my income, I also was smart about the increase of the income that I had, right? I could have increased my income and then also increased my lifestyle and spent more of that money. But I knew that the power of compounding, the power of time, that if I was able to increase my income, which I did, I then was like, okay, if I can just keep my expenses the same, and especially in my early 20s, I was living by myself. I was single in the Midwest. So my cost of living, my apartment was like $1,000 and $1,050 a month base rent, like for a 1-bedroom in the Midwest. So like, it wasn't like it was, I was living this lavish lifestyle. My income was great. I wasn't making millions of dollars. I wasn't even making, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. I was making over 6 figures, but I was able to really, really, really save and invest a lot of that money. And just doing that consistently over time, and then the market obviously helping me, having some fun money on the side did well. Maybe not right this today, the portfolio is doing well, but has done well. Has really helped me get to where I am. But I would say the biggest thing is increasing my income. And again, I know it's easier said than done, but I think that stems from taking a chance on yourself, believing in the skills that you have, and then, doubling down on that. And it's not like you have to quit your job today and go all in on this random idea you had last night in bed, but it's more of like, what am I good at? What skills do I have? And then maybe it starts from, I have my 9-to-5 job. When I get home, I spend an hour, 2 hours doing whatever it is to, maybe it makes $10 this month, maybe it makes $0 for 2 years, but then you just continually do it. And maybe that's a way to increase your income to save and invest more money.
So what's like, I mean, yeah, I love all that. And that's one of the things that stands out about your story. And, I've definitely noticed a lot of those themes with other people, and, me to a degree, I've done some of those things, like the ability to, increase your income, but keep your standard of living the same. That's a very powerful tool. It's personal finance 101. But a lot of people don't do that. So like if you're in a place of comfort where you're at, when it comes to like, you come home and you spend money on eating out or this or that, and you do the normal things, but you have this, desire deep inside that you want to build wealth. You want things to get better. Like, why don't people do what you did? And like, how do you break out of that comfort zone to like push yourself to actually do these things? Like, what's the secret there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, it starts like with like materialism, in the sense that, I was in my early 20s and I was really, I say private in the sense that I have, social media is nothing's private there, but it's behind Decade Investor. It's like it's not my actual name. For those that don't know, my name's not actually Decade Investor. It is my picture, but in my personal life, like where I grew up in my city, my family, I'm not like walking around being like, hey guys, I have, $500,000. Like I'm cool. You're not. Like that's not who I am. But some people did know. And I remember having a conversation. I'm currently engaged, but some girl I was not dating. I saw her a few times, and she caught wind of Decade Investor and was like, "Oh, you have all this money. Like, if I had all that money, I would have a huge closet and have all these clothes." And I didn't say anything then, but thinking back, it's like that what inhibits a lot of people from building wealth, right? It's easy to make A, spend B, and save and invest C, or whatever the difference is. But in practice, right, it's like, oh, I was making $5,000 this month. I have an increase in pay. I have started a business, and I'm making $6,000 or $7,000. After tax, that's $2 extra grand a month. I should save and invest it, or maybe, most of that save and invest it. But also, like, I really want that brand new F-150. I really want that brand new Tesla. And then I also want to go shopping, or I want to buy myself this. And that idea of like, I have more money now potentially, but also like those desires of wanting to spend more because now that you have it. And how I broke away from that is, I'm not human. Right. Andy, for those that don't know, or if you haven't listened to any of the podcasts with myself, like Andy and I used to own a business together. So him and I used to be a work couple. We talk like every day. And, I have the same desires. Like Andy and I would message back and forth, and it's like, I really have wanted a Tesla, and like, I really wanted these things. I wanted to do these things. I'm a young 20-year-old in my early 20s, like making some good money. I wanted to spend it, but I also knew like if I wanted to get ahead, if I wanted the life that I wanted, which was a place where I had financial independence, financial freedom, the ability to say F you, money kind of thing, or say, I'm not doing this because I don't need the money. I knew I had to break away from that materialism, trying to keep up with the Joneses society, and that's my secret.
Yeah, I love that. And the car examples, go out there and buy that F-150 or that Tesla. Those are some very specific examples you gave there.
They're on top of mind. They're on top of mind.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like, it comes down to, what decisions are you willing to make? What sacrifices here and there for the long term? I mean, we both drove used economy cars for way longer than, most people typically do. And didn't have car payments and invested the difference. And it's just like there are certain luxuries and nice things in life that, are worth doing every once in a while. And you should even still do as you're trying to like go on your journey to build wealth. But if you can hold back on them most of the time, every once in a while treat yourself, whatever. But if you can hold back on most of the time, you can, it makes a difference. But like you said, most people just don't, they just do give into those luxuries all the time. Like your example of, when she's talking about if I had $500,000, I'd have this giant closet with everything. It's like, no, you wouldn't, because as you buy all those things, you don't have that money to invest. So you'd never accumulate it in the first place. And that's just, the reality. But so a couple of things that you said, I want to explore. We had Sleep Money Club together. When I first met you, it was through Twitter. I was just like trying to figure it out, and we, connected there. You started a investing dividend app. You have this, super popular newsletter now. Now you're doing like financial advisor type stuff. So like, we've done a few things together, but you've done YouTube, like you've bounced around and tried a bunch of stuff, which signals to me that, you're not afraid to like try things and see what sticks. So maybe talk to me about that, like the value of experimentation with like trying new businesses and stuff, but also like why you do that? Like what the impetus behind actually going out there and trying all that?
Yeah, I think for me, and this is my personality, is like I get bored if I just like went to my job and came home and did nothing. I'm not saying that's wrong or right, but for my own personality, like I knew when I graduated college, when I was working my first job out of college, like I knew I didn't want to do that forever. I didn't want to wake up, go to my job, come home, and then just like sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Again, nothing wrong with that. That's just not what I wanted to do. And so I was like, all right, let me experiment. And it started with Twitter. I was like, let me experiment with this Twitter thing. And that started kind of doing well. And someone's like, hey, you need to try out Instagram and start posting there. So I started posting there. And then I went to YouTube and I leveraged my social media, Twitter and Instagram for my YouTube. And then they were like, you should do a podcast. And then I met Andy, and maybe I'm getting these a little chronologically out of order. But point being is that I knew I just wanted to like not do nothing. And so it was like trying different things and saw, what stuck and what didn't stick. And there's, Andy mentioned a few things that I've done or am doing that did well or are doing well, relatively speaking. And but there's also many things I've tried that didn't work out. Right. And I knew that, I'm not going to step up to the plate and hit a home run on the first pitch. Right. You might get a pitch, strike. Maybe you hit a single, maybe you hit a double, maybe you didn't hit a home run. Who knows? But I knew that if I just sat on the sidelines, I'm a sports guy. I know Andy's a huge sports guy. But yeah. I think of it in terms of sports, right? It's like, I don't want to sit in the stands and just watch other people experiment, for lack of better terms, and then find success, and then like they're living the life that maybe I want to live. It's like I know that I have to get onto the field, I have to get up to the plate and swing if I want to achieve the things that I want to achieve. And I also knew that you have to test things out. It's not like you just try nothing or you try one thing and it fails and you lose. It's like, no, you got to keep stepping up to the plate. And so that's why I have tried and continue to try different things and always progress in my career, both personally, or professionally, is because if you just stop, that's kind of when you start to fall behind. And I'm just a competitive person who really gets bored doing nothing. And if you gave me $500 million today, I wouldn't just like go sit on the beach and do nothing. And I'd still be trying different things and experimenting, because that's just kind of who my personality is.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree. And I relate to a lot of that. I mean, a lot of the stuff I've tried is just, I want to be doing something with my time, because not only do I want to, be successful and progress and build wealth and money and all that stuff, but also it's just fun. Like it's just more fun than the alternative, I guess. But yeah, it's like, not everything is going to be the slam dunk, but like you don't know until you try. Like I got just very tired of watching YouTube videos where people talk about like, I'm making all this, passive income, this and that. And I wasn't doing those things. But I was getting tired of watching them and, realizing I wasn't doing anything to make that happen. The only difference between me and that person was that they tried and I hadn't. And like, the worst case scenario with all that stuff is like you lose some time, maybe a little bit of money, but you lose some time. But like the ultimate downside is, you get to your deathbed and you have all these regrets and stuff of the things you didn't do. How much is that of a motivator? Like, is it just you are excited about these things and you're gonna try them and you do these, various things, keep yourself busy and excited and always building? Or is there also a piece of it that's like, I don't want to have these regrets one day?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can, we all don't know when our time is up. So with that, with that being said, like our time could be up tomorrow, or it could be, we could live to 150, or if we have Elon Musk or someone, we could live to 350. I don't know.
Technology.
But technology is going to make us live forever, but which I don't think I'd want to live forever, caveat there. But yeah, I would say a motivator there is, I don't want to have the regret, in the sense that I don't want to be on my deathbed, whenever that may be, and not really be proud of the life that I lived. And I'm not saying that proud has to be that I have to accomplish a bunch of money and accomplish, my Twitter hits 1 million. Like, it's not that. It's just like, I don't want to be on my deathbed and be like, wow, I kind of just like existed here. No one really nothing really changed or got better, or I didn't change someone's life. That's what I like, whatever you deem to bring you joy. Like, to me, like I didn't want to just sit there and be on my deathbed and be like, yeah, that was kind of it. I just existed and that was all. So that's probably a motivator as well, of like trying to do something good in society and humanity. And my little small, social media page, or, the career I'm in now, like whatever it is, like, can I make a difference there? And to me, like will not have me have regrets on my deathbed.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. So, okay, so talking about all the things, a lot of those things are surrounded by the world of finance. You talk a lot about investing in money and this and that on your Twitter, for example, which is how we originally connected. So, the S&P 500, for example, seems to just be making new all-time high after new all-time high. So, what is your current view of the market, like the stock market? Like, is it going to keep going up? Is this is it going to correct big time? Like, what does this feel like to you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the market is up like 13-15%, give or take, as we record this. A couple weeks ago, a couple Mondays ago, we had that flash crash. It wasn't really a crash, but that Monday morning, and then quick recovery. I think before that, we were up like 16-18% in the S&P for the year. NASDAQ up a little bit more, and Dow Jones as well. I don't know. I mean, I'm not someone that sits here and guesses what do I think the market will do tomorrow, next week, shoot, really even this year. And I think a lot of analysts that are paid to predict what the market's going to do are also usually wrong year to year, because it's really, really hard to predict. 2022 was a down year. 2023 was, okay, you know what? The recession's coming. And then 2023 was like an up year. And here we are in August of 2024. And, we're still above the average in terms of returns, and through August at least. And so, is a pullback, is a crash coming? Yes. I just don't know when it's coming. So I'm going to be right to say, yes, it's coming, but I'm not going to say a time, so that if someone watching this tomorrow, or when this is posted, or 5 years from now, whenever the crash comes, I was right, because it's going to come. I just don't know when it's going to come.
Yeah, I mean, crash and corrections, they're kind of inevitable, but so far the market has basically eaten all those up over the long haul, and is kind of up and to the right. So, okay, most of your background when it comes to investing is in like the stock market and traditional assets. We're going to get into some of the other ones in a minute, but like your main portfolio, break that down for me. Like, what does your main portfolio look like?
Yeah, so if we're talking about non-crypto, so it's easy to separate that. So non-crypto, I would say majority of my portfolio is in ETFs, broad market ETFs, whether that's US, international, large cap, small cap. So it's all in ETFs. I'm not a huge stock picker. I do have a portion of my stock investments in individual stocks, which I know we're going to talk about soon. But just as a whole, if I was looking at the pizza as a whole, a vast majority is in ETFs, and I keep it very, very simple. And that's what it is. Very simple. I buy those every single week and keep it easy.
Is a majority still S&P 500?
Yeah, majority is in the S&P 500, but I made it a goal on my social media a couple years ago. Is like, I'm going to get $100,000 in the S&P 500, and I have since surpassed that. But now I'm slowly putting money in. I'm still putting it in there, but I'm putting money in other ETFs that just kind of diversify out of just the S&P 500.
What's your brokerage of choice these days?
Yeah, I love Fidelity. Fidelity is where I am. I have my retirement accounts at Vanguard. I probably should just bring it all under one roof, Fidelity. But Fidelity is my choice. But I'd use Vanguard and Robinhood as well.
I know for a while you were M1 guy. I still have one of my brokerage accounts at M1. What was the move from? I also have Fidelity accounts too. I like Fidelity. Why was the move from M1 to Fidelity?
Yeah, I mean, I made a whole podcast episode on this, but basically the reason,
link that down below.
Thank you. But the reason I moved over was just because, number one, for simplicity, right? So I had like I said, I had Vanguard for retirement, Robinhood for some fun money, and then Fidelity, and then I was like, I also have M1, so I was like just all over the place, and that was number one. And then number two was the reason I really liked M1, and what drew me to M1 originally was the ability to make pies and then have it like auto invest, this much money into this holding and this much into this holding. And then Fidelity, I don't know the exact time frame. It was sometime this year. They came out with a pie. It's not really a pie, but it's a similar pie feature. as well as auto investing where I can say like, I'm going to deposit $500 and I want 300 to go into this one, 200 to go into this one, 100 to go in this one. Not exactly like M1, but very, very similar. And so I didn't really see the need to have M1 because like that was kind of why I was there. And now Fidelity came out with it. Fidelity does have another feature. I believe they call it Fidelity Baskets or Basket Portfolio. I think it's like $5 a month. Don't quote me on the price. And that's like pretty much like M1. Like, I don't know if it's a spitting image, but very, very similar. I'm not doing that. I'm just kind of doing it myself. But I made the switch from M1 and I just transferred the account over to Fidelity.
Yeah, simplicity is powerful. I like M1, but honestly, like the main like big time feature of it, the pies and stuff, is something that the longer time has progressed, the less I care about because, I mean, well, one, in my taxable brokerages, I don't want to actually be doing rebalances and stuff very much. But two, I'm just not terribly interested in doing individual stock picking all that much. Now, crypto, sure, I'll do everything and anything. That's okay. That's interesting. I will have to listen to that episode of your podcast. Okay, now let's talk. That was the main portfolio. S&P 500 heavy. We're talking to a guy that's got VOO tattooed on his body.
Yes,
so love the S&P. Now let's switch gears and talk about the higher risk portfolio. And I know you don't talk about the exact stock tickers within it, but I would like to get maybe a little bit of insight around what you're doing with that one.
Yeah, so it was about a year ago. I still have this portfolio on Robinhood, and I was using it to sell options on, and I was selling options on multiple different stocks. But with the Bitcoin at the time when the Bitcoin halving was coming up, this was about a year ago. I knew it was coming up earlier this year in 2024. And there were some Bitcoin mining stocks that I had been trading options on or selling options on. And so I was like, well, maybe this is a way to, kind of take a little bit of risk from selling options and put it into some Bitcoin mining stocks that at the time I thought were, depressed in price and maybe had a potential to run due to the Bitcoin halving, as well as the ETFs that were rumored to be coming out very soon last year. And so I was like, let's take this selling options portfolio and let's just kind of, for lack of better terms, for the portfolio money, not all my investments, but my portfolio money, go all in on some Bitcoin mining stocks. And so that's what I did about a year ago. And that portfolio has been a very, very big roller coaster, which we can talk about the swings in value. But yeah, so I have that fun money portfolio where it started out with, I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, grew to a pretty sizable percentage of not sizable, but bigger than what it was, portfolio allocation in terms of size of my investments. And then since, because of my friend Bitcoin's being down a little bit, these stocks are a lot more down. But I just see it as I believe in Bitcoin. So I'm going to start with that. I believe in Bitcoin, and I'm sure we can talk about Bitcoin as well, but I believe in Bitcoin, and I believe in the success of Bitcoin. And I see these Bitcoin mining stocks as a way to grab some added risk of Bitcoin, right? So like a multiple return potential. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I don't know. Like if Bitcoin goes up 1%, these might go up 3, 4, 5%. I'm not saying that's going to Bitcoin's, let's say it's at 60,000, it goes to 120. If it 2x's, these won't 4x. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think this adds a little bit of risk and a little bit of sprinkle of risk onto my Bitcoin belief. I don't plan to hold them forever, but I do plan to hopefully get some outsized returns with these Bitcoin mining stocks.
Yeah, and then talk to me about like how you view this portfolio, like in terms of your overall strategy. Like obviously you have your main portfolio, and you've got these super long term conviction plays. Like you're going to be, people invest in the S&P 500 not for next week; they invest for years from now, right? But like, how does this portfolio fit into the vision? Do you view it as like kind of an asymmetric bet, like it can increase the overall net worth if things go really well? Do you view it as like just a fun outside experiment from the main one? Like, how do you view this in terms of like overall strategy?
Yeah, so I don't actively put money into this portfolio. So the money that was in there last year is what's in there now. So I don't actively contribute on a weekly basis to this portfolio. All my weekly contributions go toward either Bitcoin or my main ETF portfolio. So I don't actively add to this. I also don't want to be in this portfolio for the next 40 years like I would be my main ETF portfolio, especially, which I'll talk in a second about, like the volatility that it's seen. But I view it as just whether we want to say it or not, especially if you're like interested in investing, you always have that little bit of like, ooh, I want to kind of ride the wave of the stock market or crypto, whatever it is. Like I want to have a little bit of fun money, right? We all have that kind of gambler sense in our mind to some degree, potentially. And so for me, it's like, this is a way for me to take a little bit of money that could it go to zero? Yes, it could go to zero. And if it does, like, is it going to suck? Yes. Because when I say the dollar values, for some people, that might be their entire portfolio overall. And they're like, well, if that went to zero, that would suck. But keep in mind, like, relative to overall investments. But I just see it as like a fun money. And, I don't plan to be in this forever. To be honest with you, if my thesis is correct, where it kind of adds a little bit of layer of return from Bitcoin, my really overall goal is to take most of the money earned from this and just use it to buy more Bitcoin.
Yeah, I like that. So, talk to me about this part. There's obviously that element of like, you like Bitcoin, that you can add a couple layers of risk and maybe, multiple, potential with mining stocks and stuff. But is there any other reason? Like, do you like the mining stock businesses? Do you think it's an interesting like type of a company? Like why was the mining stock something that like you gravitated towards?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I like the business speak in the sense that they always have to do these at the money offerings and then the stock price just plummets after it does well. So I don't know like if I'm a huge fan of the business model itself personally, but I do believe that as Bitcoin increases in value, and we've seen this when it went from 15,000 or whatever to 70,000 over the last year or so, and then now like even these day-to-day swings we've had the last couple of weeks where it might go from like 58,000 to 61,000. These Bitcoin mining stocks and other Bitcoin related stocks are up on that day or down on that day at a multiple higher than what Bitcoin is, and so it's more of just like an extra layer of risk that I'm sprinkling on the Bitcoin belief. And like I said, it might work out, it might not, but also like if I don't plan to be in these for forever. The end goal in this scenario is to accumulate more Bitcoin, and this is just a way to see if I can have a little extra powder to buy Bitcoin in the future if Bitcoin does go up.
And if these do really well and you sell them, you exit these positions and you want to acquire more Bitcoin, are you going to buy Bitcoin with this money, or will you consider buying the Bitcoin ETFs? Like, what's the plan there?
No, I'm all for self custody and buying Bitcoin. When the ETFs came out, the day that they came out, Andy messaged me, or we were messaging about something, probably about that, and he was like, "You need to buy one share for them just to say you're part of the revolution." I do have to admit, I did sell that one share because I was like,
oh.
Yeah, I mean, I was a part of the revolution for a few months, and then I was like, let me just take that. I didn't actually take that money and buy Bitcoin with it because it was like $70, but I would just rather own Bitcoin itself. And while I think Bitcoin ETFs are great for people that maybe don't understand or don't know what to do, how to self custody those things, but for myself that knows how to do those things, I would rather own the actual Bitcoin myself.
So let me ask you what you think about this. Someone like me. You might have a different opinion for someone else, especially if that someone else is maybe just getting started on their financial journey. But, I like these Bitcoin ETFs, even though I'm a huge fan of self-custody Bitcoin. I mine Bitcoin. I just want to have actual Bitcoin myself. But I'm also a big fan of these because I have, a Roth IRA. I can't really contribute to it anymore. I don't meet the requirements, but, I still have money in there, and it was, S&P 500 or something like that. Now it's Bitcoin ETFs. So I'm curious, like, what do you think about that strategy around the Bitcoin ETFs?
Yeah, I that's kind of what I meant there. And sorry for the didn't make sense there, but yeah, like for those that are maybe older, the older generation, like even older than Andy over there,
I'm not that old. I'm not that old.
No, but like I'm, like my parents' age, like in their 50s or 60s, that they want to add that extra layer of Bitcoin to their portfolio. Then of course, like the ETFs that's why they pass the law and let them, or pass the rule to let them come in, is so that those people could get that exposure. But then also younger people too, that like you said, don't have the knowledge of what is self-custody. How do I do that? How do I, like I have to get this little USB looking device, and what are these 24 words or whatever it is, or 18 words, or Andy knows more than I do about that stuff. But these words that mean these things, I have to park and drive and driveway. Like what are these? They don't get that stuff, then the ETFs are great for that. But for personally, that's just, I would rather go the extra layer for the extra security. But for most people, that's the ETFs are great.
Yeah, you had it right the first time. 24 words, seed phrase. Well, it could be 12 or 24. There's different options. But I'm curious, like, yeah, I totally agree with your assessment. What if, since you're in the world of, financial planning or financial advising, like just through that lens, is it like crazy to you if someone like, I'm like, I have, my entire Roth IRA is just Bitcoin ETF. Is that like ringing alarm bells? Is that something that if someone tells you, you're like, whoa, hold on a second there? Or is it like, what are your opinions on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like not to be the typical financial advisor, but it all really depends on the person's situation and goals. But separate of that, like if you were just asking me that question, I would say it probably is crazy, like in the lens of traditional finance. But at the end of the day, like you control your own money, and so if someone approached me as a financial planner or financial advisor, then I can't just say yes or no, do this or do that. But if you're like, you as in not you, Andy, but someone's watching this or listening is like, I believe in Bitcoin and I only want to do this, and this is what I want to do, and I believe this, and I'm going to do this, then that's great. But I can like tell you, if you're going to go approach a professional, like a financial advisor or financial planner, and ask them their opinion, they're probably going to call you crazy. But doesn't mean that's right or wrong. It's just, they have different levels of, risk that they believe and have. And again, doesn't make it right or wrong, just kind of how people view different things.
And maybe you'll agree with me here, but I would kind of assume that the majority of financial planners or financial advisors or whatever are more steeped in the traditional world, just because crypto's newer and stuff. There's a lot that are progressive and they're changing their opinions and stuff. But given that world is fairly traditional, and when I first met you, especially, you were very S&P oriented, very traditional, broad spectrum, ETFs, long-term investing and stuff like that. However, now you really like Bitcoin. And it's interesting to me because that's, not always the case with long-term, traditional stock market investors. So let's change the topic here a little bit, away from the ETFs and stuff, just talk about Bitcoin. Why Bitcoin? Like why did you decide to adopt that into your strategy? What do you see in Bitcoin? Why did you change your mind about something like that?
Yeah, I would say originally when I started out at 17, I didn't really, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I didn't even know like what Bitcoin was. And when I heard about it, I was like, oh, like that was when it was Silk Road and all that stuff it was like, not when it came out, but you hear about that because that's kind of the time frame of events. And you're like, oh, like that's what you use to buy drugs or illegal things. And, so I had a negative connotation about Bitcoin at first. And then, as I progressed in my age, but also like learning about finances and money, and just like I'm someone who loves to study and understand things, Bitcoin conversation, especially 2020 timeframe when it really took off in terms of price and it started to gain some popularity. I start to reopen that conversation in my mind about like, what is this thing, Bitcoin? What is it supposed to do? What is the idea behind it? And then, I just continually study it. But then also it's like, I'm looking at now, like, our national debt is at what, 34 trillion or 35 trillion. It's being added like $100 billion every 5 days or whatever the number is. And, presidents, doesn't matter which party, I'm not getting political. I'm just saying either party's adding debt to the national debt. And it's like, I'm going to probably say this wrong, but I think it's second or third largest expense of the U.S. government now is paying back interest on the national debt. I think it's number 2, but it might be number 3. It doesn't matter. Point is 2 or 3. It's still, that's huge in terms of what position it's at. And so it's like, do I think the U.S. dollar is going to fail? No, I don't think it's going to fail. I'm not going to sit up here. I personally don't. Maybe you disagree, Andy. I don't think it's going to fail. But I also, like, at some point, like, I'm looking at the writing on the wall, and it's like, there's got to be something that potentially gets us out of this scenario. And maybe that's Bitcoin, maybe it's Bitcoin Cash. Just kidding. But there's got to be something that fights against this, and I believe that to be Bitcoin, and that's why I buy it, and that's kind of why over the last year or so I've really been interested more about buying it, and so that's kind of what led me here today.
Yeah. I think it was you who tweeted semi-recently, whatever the number was, it was 34, 35, 36 trillion dollars. I think you said something like, congrats to the U.S. government on achieving.
Yeah, that was me.
Whatever it was.
I don't remember. It's 34, 35, 36. I don't even remember. Something like that. But a lot of trillions that I wish were in my bank account, but they're not. Yes.
Yeah, it's just really crazy to let you wait. Like, we can't understand that number. That number is so big, and we're adding, I think it's $1 trillion to the deficit every 100 days on average right now. Which, when you have two things, you've got the U.S. dollar on one hand, you got Bitcoin on the other. Both really are made up. They don't really exist. 95+% of all U.S. dollars are just digital numbers. Bitcoins are all digital. Money is just, what me and you decide we're going to sell something. I'm going to sell you something. You're going to give me money. I just agree that thing you're handing me has the value associated with, whatever we're trading. That's what it all comes down to. But the difference between, there's lots of differences, but one of the big fundamental differences between Bitcoin and the US dollar is US dollar, obviously, you can make unlimited amounts. You just keep printing it and making more and more. And that number, you just artificially on a screen, turn up that number as high as you want. And Bitcoin, you cannot. So, I get, it scares me a little bit thinking about the future. I don't think the US, government's going to allow the dollar to fail, or at least, by choice anytime soon. But like, don't you, what is the solution there in your mind? Is it they, adopt Bitcoin, they buy some of that back with Bitcoin? Or is it more like we have to have some kind of systemic failure or break where we go, okay, we're going to go back to a gold standard, or put the US dollar on Bitcoin, or a basket of assets? Like, how are you viewing that long term?
Yeah, I think, politically speaking, I don't think either candidate of any party ever, I don't want to say ever, but at least any time soon, is going to be like, I'm going to spend less than we make as a government, and because they're not going to win, right? And so I don't know if, like, hey, let's just try to spend less than we make is a viable solution, because that person, like I said, who promises that is not probably going to get voted in. And so I don't know what the answer is. I wish I could solve it. But what I do know is that the route that we're currently going down is, like you said, $1 trillion every 100 days, whatever the number is. The current route that we're going down is not a good one. That's all I know. And it, the more that we spend more than we make, the more that this debt is going to rise at a faster pace, right? Because the more that you borrow at rates that you can't pay back, it's just going to compound negatively against you. And that's kind of what we're seeing. Yeah, these different parties are spending more, but it's also compounding against itself. And that's why it's rapidly increasing as well. And it's like, all I know is that the route that we're going down is not a viable one. And so maybe it is, buying some Bitcoin as the treasury, or I don't know what the answer is, but I just know the answer is not what we're doing right now. Yeah.
So along with the the idea that Bitcoin can be an asymmetric bet, it can have this big multiplier potentially. It's really interesting given the conditions. That's why you're putting a percentage of your portfolio towards it. Is it all just that, or is there part of it too? Maybe you hinted at some of this, that it's almost like it's an insurance policy. If things don't get fixed anytime soon, and we have some systemic issues, that you have this alternative, it really is a truly alternative asset. Like, how do you view it in those terms?
Yeah, I see it as like if I don't know if I can cuss on here. If shit hits the fan,
Dan.
okay. If shit hits the fan, and worse comes to worse, like in terms of financially market speaking, maybe people run to Bitcoin, and maybe this is their digital gold, for some people will call it that. If that's the case, then great. I was ahead of the curve there in terms of adopting Bitcoin personally. So yeah, I would say it's both, but it's that insurance policy, for lack of better terms, that like if things do not go well, and in terms of like the debt is continually increasing and inflation, do we ever get down to 2% long term that they want? I don't know, but odds are doesn't look like we are anytime soon, at least. And that's just going to compound prices of goods, right? Because 2% of $100 is less than 2% of $102, right? 2% might stay the same, but the prices have inflated. So like the dollar amount change year over year is getting bigger and bigger. And so it's like, these things are all happening. What is like the, insurance policy, right? You have a car, you have an insurance policy on your car, just in case you get into a wreck, you pay a little bit of money for a big payout for the value of your car, or that person's car that you wrecked into. Same kind of way I'm viewing it with Bitcoin, is like I'm putting a little bit of money in every single week. And if shit hits the fan, my car gets into an accident, then hey, I'm getting some reward for that. I'm getting the return on my investment.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it a lot of the same ways. One thing we follow each other on Twitter, so I read your tweets, and something you've tweeted about many times, and I like, you've tweeted like, checking account $2,000, savings account $10,000, investment account $500,000, whatever the numbers are, or I'm bank account poor, but I'm investment account rich. Explain to me like the rationale or reasoning behind that, and also get into maybe a little bit like, why not more cash?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start with this. I'll answer it this way. Cash is important to have in, we're talking about insurance policies with Bitcoin, right? So it's important to have an emergency fund. I'm in a camp that you need to have an emergency fund. For some people, it might be 3 months. For some people, it might be 6 months. For some people, it might be 2 years, right? It's going to be different for everyone. But I like to have a little bit of personal buffer between like my money coming in from my paycheck and stuff to my investment account. So I have the emergency fund there to give me that buffer. But most of my money, like Andy said, that kind of how I broke that down on those posts. Most of my money is invested into assets, things that with the goal that they will increase my purchasing power, but also they will just increase my money over time. And so like, I know from my own studies of people that are very much more wealthy than I am, and probably will ever be, but they are big into assets. They have their money in assets, things that will grow their money for them while they go and focus on making more money. And so, yeah, that post just basically is like a way to help people visualize, like, I keep, my checking account to pay my bills and, my month to month living. I have an emergency fund that's set aside money that's there, that if I do get into a car accident, or if something happens at my house, or if emergency arises, I have a cushion of savings there. And then everything else is there to go invest for me for the long term. And, like we were talking about earlier with the S&P, again, I don't know the exact specific, but I think on the year it's up like 15, 16%. That is way better than, if I had all my money in cash, they're paying 5%, 4.5%, but over the long term, investing, historically speaking, is the way to go if you want to build your wealth.
Yeah, I agree. So with your emergency fund, what is your comfort level? Like, where do you like to be personally in terms of like months of expenses or whatever?
Yeah, so I said earlier, I'm engaged. I'm getting married at the end of this year. But when I was single and by myself, it was like 3 months. I was pretty much like living life on the edge, just because I knew like I was the only person I had to depend on, and if things hit the fan, like I was going to make it work, and I didn't have anyone else to, that was depending on me. My fiance has a job, so it's not like she's not depending on me. But also, it's like I don't want to be in that scenario of like, hey, something were to happen and I don't have anything there for a few months, and so I beefed it up a little bit more, just because of my own personal situation. But still, it's not like I'm holding 5 years of cash in my savings account. It's still about 6 months, 5 or 6 months, and then everything else is invested.
What's the savings account of choice right now?
I've been a true Ally fan, even when they were paying like nothing. But also, I have actually have two savings accounts, not to get it too confusing. But I have like Ally because that's away from my normal bank. But my normal bank, Capital One, is they actually pay pretty well on their savings account as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have accounts at both. Allies is our day to day still. I did start using Marcus by
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs, yes, thank you. Marcus by Goldman Sachs too. So speaking of money and making money, there's Twitter, and I keep referring back to Twitter because we're both on Twitter. There's lots of tweets like, 250,000 is the new 100,000, or, six figures doesn't cut anymore. And so, what do you think? Like looking at the landscape, looking at your own experience, looking at where the market and various things are, does 100,000 cut it anymore? Should people be dreaming bigger than that? Like, what's your view on the six-figure salary?
The typical financial planner, financial advisor answer is it depends. But it really does, right? Like if you're living in New York City and you want to live in Manhattan, then $100,000, I mean, it might work out again if you have roommates and you're very smart. But also if $100,000 in Ohio, probably go a little bit further. So it obviously is location dependent, but also, those posts that say that, I kind of get a chuckle because yes, I get what they're going for. It's more like engagement, farming, but it's like, yes, due to inflation, $100,000 is not the same as $100,000 10 years ago, right? Like we all know that's true. But I also would argue that I'm just coming up with this right now as I speak, so it's probably going to sound stupid looking back, but like our consumption inflation, right? Like our social media inflation has made people desire to want to, live a lifestyle that they maybe can't afford. And so while, factually speaking, $100,000 in terms of buying power today is not the same as it was 5 years ago, do I still think that, you can, if $100,000 is a good income to have? Yes. Like statistically speaking, majority of people do not make $100,000 a year. I don't know the number, but it's not a lot, compared to other income, lower levels. And so it's still a great goal to have. And if you achieve that, that's still great. All that at the end of the day, what matters is how are you utilizing that $100,000 income or $200,000 income. And I post this sometimes, and it's kind of like one of those like, okay, we get it. You said it a million times, but it's true. Is like someone making $200,000 a year and someone making $100,000 a year can end up in very, very different places financially, of how they use the $100,000 or $200,000 a year income, right? So like the person making $200,000, yeah, they might be living a better day-to-day lifestyle because they have the nicer car, the better house, the better vacations. But in terms of like overall financial picture and wealth building, they could actually be in a worse financial spot than the person making $100,000 that lives on 65,000 or 70,000 and saves and invests 30,000, again, assuming after tax. So it's like, yes, I would love, everyone's like, well, I'd love to make $250,000 versus $100,000. Of course, we all would, right? Why make $100,000 when you can make $250,000? But it's like $100,000 is still a good salary, location dependent, but also like, how are you using it? Are you trying to live a $250,000 lifestyle on $100,000? Well, then of course it's not going to be enough. So that's really the big question there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be surprised just how many like high earners don't have huge investment accounts, aren't actually saving money, this or that, how so many are actually living kind of paycheck to paycheck. And yeah, you've tweeted a lot with really good examples of like the person who makes $200,000, but their yearly expenditure is like $190,000. They're actually doing worse than the person who makes $100,000, but saving or investing $50,000, half their income. So it's all about, how you can deploy that. And, I know you had a fairly modest salary starting out. I know I sure as heck did. My first ever job out of college, I made $23,000. I've still ended up a multimillionaire before I turned 40. So it's all about how you deploy that money. But like looking forward, ultimately we want wealth for, down the line. We want to save and invest now so we have something later. how do you view retirement? Is retirement doing nothing and sitting on the couch watching TV? Is it sitting on the beach when you're 65? Does retirement have a different meaning? Like, what does that word mean to you? What does that lifestyle look like?
Yeah, I always joke with people that currently I'm not the greatest at golf. So golf is not, I can't just go play golf every day. Maybe that's probably what would make me better. But my retirement is, at least today, I'm 26, so it's not like I'm that close to retirement. But I don't know. I mean, right now, like, let's again kind of going back to what I said earlier. Like, if you gave me $500 million, like, I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. And so I think, to me, like, retirement is more about, like, for me, again, this is for me, doing things that I wake up and actually enjoy doing. And it's not like I have to make money from it. If I made no money from it, maybe I lost just a little bit of money on it. Like, it didn't matter because, I could A, financially afford it, and B, I enjoyed doing it. Right. So I don't know what it'll look like, day to day, but what I think it will be is doing things that I love, that I can afford to do based on what the assets that I have. And then, whether or not I make money from it or not, it doesn't matter, because I hopefully put in the work in my current life, like right now, that I can achieve and do those things whenever that retirement day comes.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of alignment there. I've never viewed retirement as an age or even as like a lifestyle. Retirement to me is when you have enough money that work is just optional. So you can do all the hobby, you can build another business, you can build a business here, and it doesn't matter if those things do or don't make money. I mean, cool if they do, cool if they don't, whatever. But you're doing those things because you enjoy them, but you have enough money squirreled away that it's irrelevant. Like, you can just live off those investments in perpetuity until you die, and you can do whatever you want along the way. Yeah, I think it's a little bit, it cheapens it a little bit to me when it's just a age metric. You just have to have enough so that at some point you can just stop doing whatever and just sit there like a log, for your last like 15 years of life. And like, if you want to do that, and if you've worked your whole life and you just want to like chill out, cool. But I feel like there's a better path in there, which I think you would probably agree. Yes.
Yeah, I think, like, for some people, if that's what they think, like, hey, I just want to go home, retire, and sit on the couch and watch Wheel of Fortune all day. Again, if that's what you want to do, great. You love that show. You're good at guessing, but I'm
a huge Wheel of Fortune enthusiast.
But I think what could be causing that is you just maybe are not a huge fan of what you're doing day to day. Maybe it's you're in a job you don't like. Maybe you're surrounded by people you don't like. I know it's not as easy as like just go find a different job, but maybe it is like, hey, can I maybe do part-time work instead of full-time work because I can afford it? Or maybe I want to, I've always wanted to be a tour guide at whatever is in my city. Can I do that? Right. I don't think it has to be like I work or I don't work. I think there's different things in the middle that can allow you to retire, but also you don't have to hate the work that you do.
Yeah, me and you both have given up social obligations and other things, like on the side, not completely, but instead of going to the bar every single night after our regular jobs when we had those, and like hanging out or whatever, just coming home and watching. We talked about this already on this podcast, but like you can take some of that time, not all the time, just some of it, and dedicate that towards trying to build something else. And then if that something else is successful, well, then congratulations, you now have an out from the thing you hate. But if it's not, well, then you tried, you wasted some time maybe, or maybe it's not even wasted because you got some good lessons, but you can try again with something different, or you can just go back to the life you were living before and like nothing happened, right?
Yep, exactly.
So, here towards the end, I want to touch on a couple last things. One is, just kind of what you're seeing out in the market, what you're seeing with your own portfolio, what you're seeing with the Fed and the government and, broadly the economy, et cetera. What does 2025 look like to you? Does it look really bullish? You think, big time bull run? Are things looking really good? Like, what does the momentum look like right now?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if I can give an answer, but I'm gonna totally not answer your question to say something else because I forgot to say it earlier. The high risk stock portfolio that I have, I told people I would tell them the value swings of it. So at one point it was like I think it was like worth 50,000 when I started to like decide to go into the Bitcoin miners. Then end of December of 2023, I think I was actually in Mexico, and I remember I was like, wow, portfolio is doing pretty well. And I want to say it was like 160, 170, 170,000 was the value. And it like very quickly fell back to like 65,000, give or take. And then the ETF, conversation started to resurface, or no, maybe it was halving. I don't remember the timeline getting out of it, but like in February, March or so, the portfolio jumped back to like 160, 170 again. And I didn't sell. And then now it's like back down to like the 50s, 60s again. So I didn't even answer your question. I don't even remember what it was, but I just wanted to get that out there, that is the volatility. I'm not saying every high risk portfolio follows that type of swing, but just what I'm seeing and being able to stomach that. And I know some people are gonna be like, well, I would have sold if it was at 160. And it's like, well, hindsight's always 20/20, right? It could have kept going up. And so that was a lesson learned. Like, shoot, I could have sold it, but the idea is it goes back, and maybe I'll take some profits then.
So like, here at the end, I think, if someone's listening to this, they're, younger, maybe they're not young, just someone who's starting out. Obviously you have a great story of like talking about going from, zero to now $500,000 in net worth, soon, if I was a betting man, which I am, cause I'm in crypto. If I was going to put money on this, I would, that you would hit millionaire status before you turn 30. Like, that trajectory is great, starting from zero and working your way to where you are now. And I think there's a lot of like valuable lessons for someone who's just kind of wanting to get started in this whole world of, personal finance and investing. So, if you can go back and, talk to your younger self, but somebody else who is like your younger self, doesn't have any investments yet. Maybe they even like, you're almost paycheck to paycheck. They don't really have a lot of money on the side to deal, to start. Like, what do you say to that person? How do they actually move from that stage to, I'm actually, doing something towards that big goal that'll hopefully snowball?
Yeah, I would say number one is to educate. I know that sounds, again, it's kind of like what is it? What do you mean educate? Like, I would say turn on YouTube, listen to people, listen to people that are giving sound advice, not like, oh, let me turn your $50 into $5,000 by tomorrow, because that's not going to work out. Listen to people that are giving sound advice, and then focus on the habit of investing, whatever your asset of choice is. If it's Bitcoin, if it's stocks, if whatever else it is, like, what is the habit that needs to be formed? And for most people, if we're talking about investing in the stock market, or if your choice is Bitcoin, it's like consistency, right? It's, okay, I might have $50 at the end of every week or every paycheck to invest. Okay, who cares about the number? When I was starting out, I wasn't investing what I'm investing now. I was just wanting to build the habit, right? And then once I built the habit of, okay, I can do, I've learned $50 every paycheck or every week, whatever it is. Oh, I focused on increasing my income. I got a certification at work, or I got a pay raise because I did great, or I got a promotion and it brings me, 20% pay raise or 15%, whatever the number is, whatever the dollar value is. Now, instead of $50 at the end of the paycheck, I have 150. I have 250. And now it's like, okay, I know what $50 a week does. And I know that's not going to turn you to a millionaire in a year, but it's like you're seeing it, you're practicing the habit. Now, when you have $250, you're putting that in, right? You're putting that in, you're learning and you're seeing, and then a year down the line, 2 years down the line, you get a promotion, and you kind of get the point of like, maybe your income increases more, you start a business, side hustle, you're making more money, whatever it is, you're now increasing your contribution, and you're watching your portfolio hopefully rise over time. And that's to me like the habits. The people that I see that are very, very successful in terms of like financially speaking, it's not like they just never invested, woke up one day and they became a millionaire or billionaire or whatever it is. They were like building habits. For some, that was investing in the stock market. For some, that was investing in Bitcoin. For some, that was investing in themselves, which allowed them to make more money to then invest into different assets. But I would say the biggest thing you can do if you're young or if you're just starting out is number one is to start. But then also number two is to build the habit, no matter what the dollar value is. And then as you build that habit, as you learn more, as you maybe increase your income, slowly increase your contribution amount. And then also, I would say, think long-term, because it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And also, I think if you just contextualize it, Colin's financial journey is like, over a decade. That's about, he's younger than me. He's got started, sooner than me, but mine's also about a decade. But I can affirm what he said. And like, even when I was starting small, just putting a little bit, just building that habit. It's amazing that once you get past the idea that, oh, I need my results tomorrow, once you just kind of forget about that part and you just get in the habit of doing it regularly, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, a year went by. Oh wow, 2 years later, and you look at that same investment account, it can be really eye-opening, even smaller amounts, how powerful that can be when it all adds up. It compounds, the asset, prices go up. It's kind of like amazing when you actually have the ability to do it over time and to zoom out a little bit like that every once in a while, because there's power in putting in the reps.
Yeah, I mean, I would, there's a cliche like the saying, and I post this like, the first 100,000 the hardest, $100,000 invested is the hardest. I'm going to take away the dollar value because that can be daunting for a lot of people. Like 100,000 seems so far away. I would just say like the first is always the hardest. Like it's just hardest to get started. The first year is going to be harder than the second year in terms of like getting there, right? And breaking over like the hump of the extra $50 that you might have spent on eating out. Now you're investing, or the extra $50 you would have spent on a brand new pair of shoes or whatever it is you're investing. Again, you have to find the balance of enjoying life and investing. But once you start to see the power of investing and buying assets, what it can do for you and for your wealth, I would be, pretty powerful to say like, hey, that is fun to watch, and you like kind of get addicted to doing that.
Yeah, I fully agree. Well, this has been fun. As per usual, as per always, when I have Kolin on the podcast, when I have Kolin on the podcast, always valuable stuff. So thank you, my friend, for coming on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And like always, if I see some other people start to get more features, I'm gonna come back on here.
Yeah, gotta stay top dog. And to everybody who is listening, thank you for listening. I will see you in the next one.